Today, we're tackling one of the most brutal dilemmas in long-term career strategy. What do you do when the goal you've pursued for years, maybe decades, starts to crush you?
Right. It's that essential question of professional survival, isn't it? It's that moment where the mountain you're climbing feels like it's actually getting taller with every single step you take.
Absolutely. So the central question we really need to wrestle with today is this. When you're facing that deep struggle, that exhaustion, should an individual prioritize, well, unwavering persistence towards their original goal, or is the smarter move strategic abandonment, redirection, a pivot, based on, alignment and the actual cost?
That sets up the tension perfectly. It's the battle between your internal conviction and just pragmatic self-preservation.
And I'll be taking the position that sustained persistence, often past the point of feeling completely broken, is the necessary road to long-term success. It's the ultimate vindication of a true enduring passion. I mean, if the path was easy, everyone would already be there.
And I will be arguing the opposite, that ignoring the crushing cost of a damaging trajectory just for the sake of consistency is a failure of strategy. Strategically pivoting or even just walking away is often the most critical move for long-term health, fulfillment, and frankly, for scaled success.
My core belief here is that true success often requires weathering a period of extreme, almost unbearable endurance. When we look at the evidence, the greatest achievements demand continued effort despite setbacks that feel fatal at the time. I mean, take J.K. Rowling. She genuinely felt like the biggest failure she knew while living on government assistance. 12 publishers rejected her.
12, yeah.
12. But she kept sending it out. And that single final submission, the 13th attempt, that was the one that changed literary history.
That story is compelling, but I think the insight shouldn't be that blind persistence works. The insight is that she was required to pay the statistical toll. Every rejection just brought her closer to the one necessary acceptance. The process was painful, sure, but the key wasn't simply doing it. It was knowing the quality was there and just enduring that painfully slow feedback loop.
And enduring takes belief. We see time and again that in real life, progress is it's slow. Sometimes an individual isn't failing. They're simply early in their journey, and that belief is the fuel to overcome years of neglect. Think of the filmmaker Miguel, who posted content for 6 years before hitting his stride. Or look at Keanu Reeves. Critics mocked him, they called him wooden, yet he persisted. He focused on the consistency of his craft and ultimately completely redefined himself as a respected actor. He refused to let external criticism dictate his internal commitment.
I see why you emphasize that internal fire, I do. But I come at it from a different way. Persistence turns destructive the moment the path itself begins to systemically drain the individual emotionally, mentally, and financially. Successful evolution often requires the brave act of letting go of the original dream's container. Consider Steve Jobs. We focus on his return to Apple, but the real masterstroke was the pivot. After being fired from his own company, he didn't fight to stay. He walked away. He later described that departure as the best thing that ever happened to him, freeing him up to rediscover his creative flow through Next and Pixar. He abandoned a specific struggle, running Apple in the 80s, to save his core mission.
But he never abandoned the idea of what he wanted to achieve.
Correct. But he abandoned the struggle. That's the point. Dreams and people change. Clinging to the career identity you defined at 22 when it actively clashes with who you are at 40 it's counterproductive. The move should always be toward alignment with your actual strengths, not some historical commitment. Oprah Winfrey is the classic case. She wanted to be a news anchor but was fired for being too emotional. That setback pushed her directly onto a path, deep conversation, empathy, connection, that perfectly aligned with her true self. If she had persisted in that anchor role, she would have capped her own potential. Let's talk about the destructive cost versus the necessary struggle, because this is where the divergence is clearest. I'd argue the material emphasizes that if a pursuit is chronically draining your relationships, your health, your sleep, and you're perpetually struggling just not to quit, that is a fundamental sign of misalignment. The self-assessment has to be ruthlessly honest. Is this struggle a temporary burnout that will pass, or is it a repeating cyclical pattern of frustration and dead ends?
I fully acknowledge the reality of burnout, of course. But I would counter that many breakthroughs are achieved precisely after that breaking point. We are often closest to success when we feel the most defeated. This is also where the sunk cost fallacy can trick us, right? It makes us think the effort already invested means we must stay. I believe that if the career still ignites a spark, even a small yes, that persistent passion matters more than temporary exhaustion. Leaving risks a deep, lifelong regret.
I'm just not convinced that the fear of future regret should dictate sustained self-destruction in the present. The cost of remaining in chronic misalignment is often staggering. Let's talk about Anna, the nurse from the material. She was emotionally destroyed every single day, suffering immense compassion fatigue despite her family urging her to stay in the stable path. Quitting that stable path was the biggest act of self-care she ever undertook. It led her to peace in medical illustration. Her persistence in the wrong role was a slow self-sacrifice. Walking away was strategic. It saved her.
Okay, but this leads directly into the question of the efficacy of persistence versus the power of pivoting. I want to frame pivoting not as giving up, but as a sophisticated persistence. It's a directional adjustment, not an abandonment of the core effort or the underlying skill set. We see this all the time. The teacher who's exhausted by the classroom pivots to instructional design. The struggling musician becomes a viral music producer. It's the same consistency of skill, just applied intelligently in a better environment.
That's a compelling redefinition. But I have to maintain that true strategic pivoting requires the intentional abandoning of the wrong battle. It's not just a tweak. It's a brave letting go of an identity. Think of the struggling musician who writes brilliant songs but has zero stage presence and hates touring. Pivoting successfully means abandoning the performer dream entirely to focus on writing for ads or for other artists. That's an intentional walk away from the primary goal of stardom.
But they are still serving the music itself, which is the core passion.
Yes, but the act of letting go of that restrictive, unsuccessful container is what frees the energy to scale. I mean, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is the absolute master of strategic pivots. He abandoned the shattered NFL dream. He pivoted to professional wrestling, a highly niche theatrical field. Then he abandoned that primary identity to pivot again into acting. He never persisted in trying to be a middling football player. He leveraged his core charisma by abandoning old definitions until he achieved mastery in a new domain. And this brings us to a crucial diagnostic test from the material. Am I chasing the dream or the idea of the dream? Many people, particularly those who are struggling intensely, they love the fantasy, the applause, the recognition, but they actually hate the grind, the solitude, the real work required. Recognizing that distinction, I think, provides the necessary justification for letting go of an illusion.
I think that self-check is essential, but let me challenge the rigidity of that distinction. What if that internal passion is less about the fantasy and more about a persistent alignment? If the dream finds you again every time you try to quit, that persistence suggests an underlying resonance with your real self that has to be honored, regardless of external critics or the current difficulty. Keanu Reeves persisted not because he loved being mocked, but because that deep connection to acting was, for him, a personal non-negotiable.
Well, ultimately, we agree on the goal: alignment. Alignment with mental health, with your values, with your real self. We simply disagree on whether persistence or strategic abandonment is the default, most effective path to getting there when you're facing deep exhaustion.
My view remains that enduring the necessary period of slow, frustrating growth is often the prerequisite for major success, and that consistency and honoring that internal passion are paramount. True fulfillment often requires pushing past what feels like impossibility.
And I'll reaffirm that while persistence is valuable, continuing to struggle against a path that is systematically crushing you is, well, it's illogical.
Strategic redirection or just letting go are brave, powerful acts that prioritize your mental health and a successful future over adherence to a failing historical commitment.
It seems clear that there is no single universal answer here.
Indeed. Some individuals find their peak after walking away, and some find it after staying 1 minute longer. The most powerful move is always the choice that leads you back to authenticity, because neither giving up nor continuing makes you inherently weak or stubborn.